السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran talks in many times about the heart, al-qalb in Arabic. If we reflect and if we also visit the narrations from the Messenger of God, from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, about this term, which means the heart, we understand very quickly that by this heart it is not meant the physical heart, that muscle that pumps blood into our body. We understand that the heart here is sort of a spiritual heart. And this is what I'll be referring to, or this is what I'll be using to refer to this term, the spiritual heart. Apparently, it is this kind of sensation that is associated with the humanity of humans. That core, that center. Or it is another expression of the human soul, al-qalb. Also, it can be understood as another expression of the human soul. And so all these psychological actions that we have are attributed to it. For example, reason. Normally, when we think of reason, we think of what? Our brains, our intellect. Apparently in the Quran, reason is one of the actions or one of the duties of the heart, of the spiritual heart. Faith, disbelief, hypocrisy, all these kind of states, guidance, mercy, they are found in our heart. Again, that is the spiritual heart. Remembrance of God, being heedless of God, the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Quran chapter 22 verse 46, أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَتَكُونَ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. Listen very carefully. Have they not traveled throughout the land, so their hearts may reason? So their hearts may reason. That reasoning which takes you or leads you to God, that's your spiritual heart. And their ears may listen. Indeed, it is not the eyes that are blind, but it is the hearts and the chests that grow blind. Now here we know Allah is not talking about this muscle. It is something that goes blind. He's saying the true blindness is not the blindness of vision or sight. It is the blindness of insight, of your heart. Quran chapter 58 verse 22, أُولَٰئِكَ كَتَبَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الْإِيمَانِ. For those believers, God has instilled faith in their hearts. So that heart is something that receives iman, something that receives faith, and strengthened them with a spirit from Him. Quran chapter 64 verse 11, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. And whoever has faith in God, He will rightly guide their hearts. Your heart is also a receptor of guidance. So all of our actions, all of the things that we do, essentially they stem in this heart of ours. And so this heart, the state of this heart is key to our happiness in this world and in the after. And therefore it is necessary for us to take care of this heart. That's a very reasonable thing to do, because like the physical heart can be affected with disease, like the physical heart that we need to take care of in terms of its health, the same thing applies to the spiritual heart. It can be affected by diseases. Allah in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse number 10, says, فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. There is sickness in their hearts. Sickness in their hearts, and God only lets their sickness increase. There are diseases that affect your heart. Diseases like what? What are examples of these diseases? Disbelief, hypocrisy, anger, arrogance, hatred towards others, conceit, self-admiration, thinking ill of people. These are some of these diseases. Betrayal, fear of things other than God, deceit, accusation of others, backbiting of others, injustice. All these are rooted in diseases in the heart, and some of them are diseases of the heart. Love of status, love of reputation, seeking dunya, lying, cruelty, all these. They could be diseases that would afflict your heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, chapter 9, verse 125 says, وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَتْهُمْ رِجْسًا إِلَىٰ رِجْسِهِمْ. But as for those with sickness in their hearts, the revealed surah, it has increased them only in wickedness upon their wickedness. Those with sickness in the heart. And obviously the heart may be free of diseases. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Chapter 16, verses 88 to 89. The day when neither wealth nor children will be of any benefit. Only those who come before God with a pure heart, with a sound heart. And that's our journey. Our journey is to ensure that this heart that God gave us in this world, we reach God with a pure one. Not only the physical heart pure of cholesterol, but actually the spiritual heart pure of the sicknesses, pure of the spiritual cholesterol that could accumulate. And so, we must understand that like the diseases of the physical heart have terrible implications on our lives, on the quality of our physical life, same way. If we don't take care of our spiritual heart, the diseases that could afflict our spiritual heart, they can actually not only ruin our lives, our spiritual quality in this world, but actually it will lead us to misery in the hereafter. And so it's very important. It's a very essential, critical thing to take care of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how this world is connected to the hereafter. Chapter 17, verse 72. وَمَنْ كَانَ فِي هَذِهِ أَعْمَى فَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ أَعْمَى وَأَضَلُّ سَبِيلًا. But whoever is blind in this world, remember the blindness that Allah talked about before, the true blindness. It's not the blindness of the vision or the sight, it's the blindness of the heart. But whoever is blind in this world will be blind in the hereafter. There is this connection, natural connection. They cannot be separated. If you choose that your heart is blind in this world, guess what will happen in the afterlife? You'll be blind in the hereafter, and even far more astray from the right way. So Iman, the good deeds, the good morals that we try to accumulate in our lives, these enlighten our heart. These purify our heart. And in contrast, the disbelief, the bad deeds, the bad morals that we collect, or that we ornament our characters with, all these, they add darkness to our hearts. A narration from our fifth Imam, Al-Imam Al-Baqir, alayhi salam, where he would say there are three types of hearts. Al-Qulubu Thalatha. An inverted heart that does not ponder on anything from others, which is the heart of the disbeliever. A heart in which there is a black spot, so good and evil are fighting together. So that's the second. So whichever of them is stronger will prevail over it. Third, and an open heart in which there is a lamp that shines and its light will not be extinguished until the day of resurrection, which is the heart of the believer. Three types of hearts. The heart of the disbeliever is that heart which actually deviated from its nature, that spiritual heart. It deviated from its nature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it for a certain purpose. But you see that this heart actually has no goal other than just this world, the material dimensions of things. And it filled itself, or it is filled with darkness. There's no light of, or any shine of faith in that heart. It became covered. It turned away from its Lord. And the second is the heart of the believer. Inshallah, yourselves. The heart whose qibla is God, whose compass and direction is actually God. A heart that desires the righteous deeds. A heart that desires Allah. A heart that desires closeness to God, nearness to God. And it attempts or tries to acquire the noble morals. The light of Iman fills this heart. And there is the other heart, which is the disfigured one. Evil and good are always fighting. They're always in this constant state of conflict. There is light of faith, but there is also darkness of sin. Who will prevail eventually? And this is a battle that many people continue to experience until the last moment in their lives. And so, we talk about this heart that Allah gave us in this world, this spiritual heart, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala initially made ready to respond to the call of God. This is what we call fitrah, the initial disposition by which which He instilled in us. That disposition that seeks truth, that seeks perfection, that seeks goodness, that seeks growth. That heart initially is ready to respond to this call. But the way we live our lives, the way we grow up, the way we are taught, maybe sometimes it can darken that heart. It can create all these layers of dust onto that natural disposition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And so the heart grows into a state where it ignores that call. And the heart therefore hardens. You've heard about this concept of qaswatul qalb, the hardening of the heart. To an extent where someone's heart becomes hard. It's not the physical heart necessarily. There might be an association with the physical heart. The mu'min, for example, whose heart is pure and is shining with the love of God, when Allah is remembered, maybe their physical heart trembles out of love for God. Maybe. Or maybe the disbeliever's heart that was filled with darkness to the extent that any sin does not even make that heart shiver out of fear of God. Maybe there might be an association between the two. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this hardening of the heart. Quran chapter 6 verse 43. فَلَوْلَا إِذْ جَاءَهُمْ بَأْسُنَا تَضَرَّعُوا وَلَكِنْ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Why did they not humble themselves when we made them suffer? Instead, their hearts were hardened. So the bala, the tribulation, the tests that God actually gives us, one of its aims is what? To keep our hearts lean, to keep our hearts soft. Otherwise, heedlessness of God, forgetfulness of God, that makes our hearts hardened. We stop listening to the call of God. Sins become normal to us. We stop seeing the realities of how terrible disobedience is of God. And so the heart would appear in the hereafter in its ugliest forms. So if we want to preserve the health of our physical heart, we know that we need to take some measures. We need to visit professionals who know about what is good for that physical heart and what is bad for it. Likewise, we need to take care of the health of our spiritual heart. And we need people who are skillful also to tell us how to take care of it, what is good for it, what is bad for it. And these are the prophets of God. The prophets of God are those people who know very well what is good for it, what is bad for it. And they came actually to remind us of that. And on top of them is the Holy Messenger of God, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali would describe the Holy Prophet, he would say, طَبِيبٌ دَوَّارٌ بِطِبِّهِ قَدْ أَحْكَمَ مَرَاهِمَهُ وَأَحْمَى مَوَاسِمَهُ. He would describe the Messenger of God, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as a doctor who travels with his medicine, a physician, a doctor of the spiritual hearts, who would travel with his medicine. He has perfected his ointments and prepared his tools. He puts some of what or some of that where is needed. That's what the Prophet was for us. He was really the doctor of our spiritual hearts. He really pointed us at what things are good for our hearts and what things are bad for our hearts. Or the Quran chapter 8 verse 24 when Allah says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِلرَّسُولِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. O believers, respond to the call of God and His Messenger when He calls you to that which gives you life. The Prophet of God is someone who calls us to what gives us life, to what revives our hearts. These things that get hardened by our practices in this world, by how we live our lives, the Prophet of God, he calls us. For what? For healing these hearts, for softening them. Allah is saying, respond to His call. That's His mission. That's the mercy that He was sent with. And so, a person obviously must strive to purify his soul, to purify this heart, to make sure she or he looks after it. And it's a process. It's a process that we live until the last day of our lives, actually. This is where the spiritual experts, they tell us about some stages that this process takes. One stage is what? Is to refine, is to purify your heart or your soul from any diseases. You cure yourself from the disease. You quarantine yourself. And the other stage is that you perfect your heart. You bring to your heart those characteristics that are shiny, that shines it. You educate it with the true knowledge. You teach it the noble morals. What issues do I have in my heart? Do I have, for example, envy? So I try to treat myself of envy. And at the same time, I try to instill into my heart happiness for the others. What issues do I have? Anger. I try to teach myself, train myself, discipline myself, that when an opportunity for anger comes or shows up, then I restrain myself. And at the same time, I try to teach my heart, teach my character, forbearance, forgiveness, patience. Right? So these have to go hand in hand. You have to purify your heart from the things that taint it, and you have to fill your heart with the things that paint it, with the things that beautify it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, inshallah. We ask Allah that He may help us look after our physical hearts, and more importantly, look after our spiritual hearts, inshallah, with His support. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. صلوات.